Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healer specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
I'm exceptionally well. Thanks for asking, Rory. Rory and I are grateful you've joined us for our first, if you're listening real-time, podcast of 2024. It is episode 286. 3 topics today, starting off with ethical, sustainable practice, where we recognise the practitioners don't maybe study the intricacies. There it is. It was there somewhere, of starting, growing and running a private practice. And today we're going to be looking at AI and how that is playing out in the new digital world and how that may affect our practice and how we can protect our clients. We're going to be going into Practice Matters today, and in Practice Matters we have an expert guest. It is Amy Launder. She's a regular guest here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, speaking about a really interesting topic. It is supporting children of narcissistic parents during a divorce process. So we're going to be diving deep into that. And remember, you can track that on your CPD tracker. And then we're going to end episode 286 by checking in, recognizing our students into student services. And we're going to be speaking about planning your placement journey. If you're listening in real time, it's that time, isn't it, of going into placements. But we're going to start off this episode looking at that ethical, sustainable practice and looking at how AI has risen up and how it may affect our practice and what we need to do as practitioners to protect our practice and, of course, to protect our clients, Rory.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good starting point, Ken. Everything we do is in service of our clients. And, protecting their privacy is something that's taught when we go into college or university to learn about counselling. And it carries on through the arc of our practice life. And I think one of the things that maybe is an unknown for practitioners is the rising world of AI, or artificial intelligence. Those little programs that can rewrite letters to make you look like you're a novelist, or or you can ask it questions. And one of the difficulties, and that we're finding, one of the biggest challenges that not only therapists are finding, but all professionals who store confidential data, is the rise of people selling data. There's a phrase that's doing the rounds, across social media, and that is that data is the new oil. And I was doing some research recently, and it's a multi-million dollar, pound, whatever currency that you have in the country listening, business. And every time you put our clients' data on documents, or we may put it into AI, or we may decide where we're storing our information on clients. If it's AI enabled, there's a very strong chance that what might happen is that the AI will scrape that data and use it. And recently, I was in a forum talking about this, and there's a real chance that if you put client data into an AI large learning platform, that what might happen is that will be stored, and someone in the future could be searching, and your client's data could come up. And already we are seeing complaints levied against professional bodies because therapists, probably not knowing, have put their clients' data into an AI, and now it is not confidential anymore. Now it's part of a huge database. I think it's a worrying trend, and I think it's one that ethical bodies will start addressing very, very quickly, because I think it's an emerging discussion that we as therapists are going to have, Ken.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a regular topic for us as counsellors, therapists, psychotherapists. And here's the thing, you may be listening to this and going, you know what, I don't use ChatGPT, I don't use AI in my practice. And I'm gonna suggest that you kind of broaden the term of that just slightly. And what I mean by that is the following. AI is being built into so many of the tools that we use on a daily basis. So here's an example. Do you use a Google Calendar? Do you use spreadsheets? Do you use any Google documents? Well, that is being AI enabled right now as we're speaking and being rolled out. Do you use a video platform, something like Zoom? Well, that has got built-in AI. So what is happening is the tools that we might use have AI built into them by the developers, because it is such a powerful tool. However, we are in a world right now that I think we will look back in many years to come, we'll look back at the history and go, wow, I can't believe that AI was unregulated then. But we are unregulated in AI, certainly here in the UK at the moment. There is movement right now in the EU. There is the first signs of what regulation may look like. But at the moment, it is the Wild West. And that means that companies developing technology can build this AI in, and it is our job as counselors, therapists, to look at what has been built in, how that works, and what kind of data is being processed. So we're going to start off by looking at what is the impact, the AI development and the impact on data security, because, clients are sharing their data with us, and we have to recognize the rapid growth of AI. This is machine learning, and we're not just talking about ChatGPT here. There's been significant advances in this last year, leading to extensive collection and processing of personal data. So Rory, you mentioned ChatGPT. Just by going on ChatGPT, anything you're putting in there is going into a learning model. You're teaching the model, and you've signed in the terms and conditions that anything you put in there will be collected and used to teach the model. So what are the risks for therapists and clients? Well, there is certainly in the world we're in right now an increased risk of surveillance, manipulation, and it's crucial for us as professionals to understand how we can protect our client confidentiality. And the impact on your therapy practice is that there is now a need for a heightened vigilance. There just is, in data handling and ethical considerations when we're using any tool that has some form of integration with AI. And I guess if you're in the UK, we speak about UK GDPR. We've spoken about it many times. And GDPR and AI compatibility at the moment, there is a tension within that data protection. So GDPR principles, like how data is collected and how it is, we would minimize the collection of data, that's being challenged now, where platforms like Zoom, if the AI is enabled, is collecting information. It's basically tracking the whole of our session with a client if it has been turned on. So I have to put that out there. You need to understand the settings to be able to do that. And I guess understanding GDPR's relevance in this new AI era, so that we can be in compliance, with the way that we process data. And it's being built into everything. So you may be having a client fill in a form on your website. Well, I know a lot of the email service providers that provide forms that can go on websites are starting to go, wow, we can make this more powerful by using AI. And at the end of the day, this is about clients' trust. We need to ensure that the data that they trust us with, we speak about confidentiality within counseling. Well, everything is confidential, excepting where we need to break that, which is kind of covered in our contract. But everything, including their data and including their name, their date of birth, their telephone number, their email address, they trust that to us. And it needs to be handled in compliance with GDPR while kind of balancing that if we are using any of the advantages of an AI tool, Rory.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the difficulty comes in the fact that a lot of the tools that we use on a day-to-day basis, like Microsoft Word, like I use Grammarly. There's huge amounts of platforms where you can put data in. Most of them are based in America. And what we're seeing now is that data protection in America is, well, I'll put it this way. European data standards are at a higher level than American data standards. And, the European Union is probably one of the toughest areas in the world for processing and storing data. The bar is incredibly high. In America, it's not as high. And there's been a number of court cases that have highlighted the American data protection, and indeed in some other parts of the world. I don't want to pick on America. There's other countries where data protection is non-existent. But a lot of the tools that we use nowadays are based in America. So when you sign the terms and conditions, and I think this is really important, if you're using any kind of tool, we tend to just go through the terms and conditions and click at the end, and then get to the meat of it, get to using the app. However, you need to look very, very carefully at how that data is stored. And a lot of organizations are still not being transparent about where that data is. So be very thoughtful where you put your information. How do you store your client notes? Do you store it maybe in one of the many drives that you can commercially buy? Cloud storage. A lot of cloud storage, unless it says otherwise, if you put your information into Google Docs and then store it in the Google Cloud, it can be open to the data being swept. It might not be in great detail, but if you're using a product like that, and you're not seeing the terms and conditions, you don't know where that data is being stored. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really important. And I think there's already been complaints levied against ethical bodies about the use of AI and, clients not being happy about where data is being stored. I think it's going to be an emerging conversation, Ken.
It is, without a doubt. And this is not a fear-mongering conversation from us at all. I mean, I'll be the first to say that I find AI incredibly exciting. I'm really interested in how it may serve therapists and how we can serve our clients better using tools. But it's like anything new. We just need to be mindful of what it is. And kind of have a bit of an understanding of what kind of information it's gathering and storing, and where that is being stored, how machine learning might be used to crunch that data, to split that data up, manipulate that data, because this is what AI does really, really well. And again, I'm going to come back to, I don't really use AI. It is the email service providers are providing AI within the emails now. So I know that Google are busy rolling this out now. So if you're using maybe a Gmail account to email a client, I'm not saying it is going through some kind of a data filter, but we need to look and understand it. That's the kind of world we find ourselves in now. I think there's an additional layer of vigilance. We need to be looking. We need to be reading those terms and conditions. And they're so long and they're so complicated and confusing. But you know what? If we have these kind of conversations, well, maybe the right tools will come out of what tools are right for us to use as therapists. And there's things that look really promising and they're very enticing. And I'll give you an example of that. There are now apps that you can kind of use natively within Zoom. So I know many online practitioners might use Zoom to hold their sessions. There is a AI capability within Zoom that after the session, it will give a précis of what was discussed, and that could look as something that's really, really useful. Oh, wow, I get a précis of my notes, something that I can maybe share with the clients. I can give them an overview of the session that they've been in. And there's also other apps that kind of integrate with Zoom that do the same thing. One of them is called Fathom, and they do the same kind of thing. They kind of monitor the session, and then they'll give you a précis of what that is. But that entails the session being monitored by an artificial intelligence, really. There is a machine looking over it to be able to do that. And if it's doing that, where is the information going? How is it manipulating that information to give us that very useful output at the end of the day? And I think the other place to look is when we're looking at the platforms that match a therapist with a client and then maybe provide the services around how that can transpire and take place. Again, is there any AI automation within that process, and how is that being used, and what data is that collecting? And I think these are just questions. These are the questions I'm asking. I'm not pointing any fingers anywhere. I'm just saying, I wonder. And I think that's where we need to come from, Rory. We need to come from a place of I wonder, and we need to be inquisitive, and we need to really deep dive in service of our clients to make sure that we are doing no harm, that we're not maybe suggesting to a client, hey, let's use this tool because it's going to help in XYZ way, where perhaps that client's data is being taken, it's being used, is being stored without their consent and without maybe us knowing, because we just ticked the box that says I agree to the terms and conditions.
Absolutely. I think that's the key thing. Making sure that we take a balanced view, and also I think it extends to a lot of the apps that you can get for your phone. There's a lot of mindfulness apps now. I know therapists sometimes recommend mindfulness apps. Well, those any app, it's possible, could mine the data off your phone.
Yep.
I've told this story before about Christmas trees in June, where I was talking to my wife in the car about Christmas trees. It was middle of June. It was beautifully hot, sunny. And then when I came to use my phone again on my timeline for my social media, there was people advertising Christmas trees. And maybe I could be a little bit paranoid, put my tinfoil hat on. However, I thought it was very telling that after having a conversation about Christmas trees, my phone brought up a series of Christmas trees adverts, vendors of Christmas paraphernalia. So I think we've got to be very careful if we're asking clients to sign up to anything. If we're using any information where clients have to put their name and address and details in, we need to be very, 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 very vigilant. And I also think this extends now to therapists who are maybe using, AI talk bots to help the clients in between sessions. Got to be very, very thoughtful about that. There's a number of supportive tools that one can access. If you Google them, you can find them, where someone can, put information in and get information out, rather like some CBT models, like Beat the Blues, where people can have a virtual CBT session. I'm not saying that particular app, but there's lots of them about. You need to be very mindful if you're going to recommend those to clients. Where's that data being stored? If they have to put their name and address in, where's that being stored? And if they're going to put them on the phone has GPS. It has a connection to people's address books. It has all sorts of things on.
Yeah.
I really think it really takes now, Ken, a new level of thinking and risk assessment when we come to talking about the world of artificial intelligence.
Couldn't agree more. And it's about that vigilance. We're just having the topic and saying, let's be vigilant. And, there's new considerations. So if we're working to UK GDPR, then part of that legislation suggests you must have a privacy policy on your website that explains how you collect and store data and where that is stored and how you process that. That is the law. So if you've got a website, it should have a privacy policy according to GDPR legislation. But do we now need an AI policy on our website? Well, here at Counselling Tutor, we certainly have already got one. And why? Because we're having the conversation, we're thinking about it. Is it the best example of an AI policy? Possibly not, because what we're doing is sitting and kind of thinking, looking at the tools we're using. We're looking very closely at what they do or how they might collect data and then making that available. But I guess as making that available on our website outward facing so it can be seen. But I guess as AI develops, as it becomes more mainstream, and it will. It certainly will. This we know. This is without doubt it will. I think there's going to be a need for an AI policy on a website. I think GDPR will change to embrace AI more. It'll be more of a holistic approach, looking at the tools we use, the data we protect, and how that relates to AI. AI is going to be massive. You know, if you think about how useful it would be to an organization like the NHS, which is the UK healthcare provider, in terms of assessing people and monitoring their development through a process, any kind of process. Well, if we're using an assessment tool that is integrated with AI, again, what's happening? If there's machine learning behind there, how is it using that data? These are all questions, I think, of a new world, questions that I certainly wouldn't have been asking just a year ago, Rory. And new considerations, but that's the whole point, isn't it? Of being vigilant, keeping our eyes on the horizon, and always doing continuing professional development in service of our clients and in service of protecting ourselves, our profession, and our practice.
Yeah, well said, Ken. And I do think that data protection isn't the most kind of sexiest of things, you know, when it isn't, is it?
No.
It isn't really. I mean, you know, it's not something that you know, I think therapists probably want to engage in. You know, there's lots of other really interesting things in the world of therapy, but it's becoming, I think, quite a pressing subject now in terms of practice. You know, before 2018, really no one was talking about data protection. You know, we had the Data Protection Act, I think, of 1998. And people stored the notes and, you know, thought nothing of it. You know, and in the last few years, and we're talking the last 5 or 6 years, it's become a quite a large part, I think, of therapist practice. How is information stored? Where are you storing it? How do clients get access to it? These are very, very important questions. And, you know, if you're asked by a professional body, these are questions you need answers to.
Yeah.
You need to be able to bring what we call a defensible decision. If a complaint is raised, and we don't want to be fear-mongering here, but if a complaint is raised about the way you store data, can you do a defensible decision? Can you show due diligence in looking at what you're using, look at the terms and conditions, being aware of where it's stored, being aware of how it can be accessed, and in terms of AI, how AI might be able to integrate with it. These are all, I think, very pressing questions. And I think the direction the world's taking, I think it's one that therapists should have that right at the top of their mind. I think it's no longer become something that, oh, well, you know, we have to do data protection, but let's talk about the therapy. I think it's something that's first and foremost really now, because what we're talking about is very, very personal information. In the same way, you wouldn't, you know, have a therapy session, you know, in a cafe. You know, you wouldn't go into, you know, a cafe and have a therapy session with a client with people sat around listening in. What you don't want to do is to put that information into any kind of application, which effectively does the same thing. It's going to be, I think, an ongoing conversation. And I think that, you know, with ethical codes now, I think due for a refresh. You know, I think the last BACP ethical framework was 2018. I am certain, although I don't know, but I'm certain that AI and how we integrate with AI will become part of the ethical landscape in the next iteration of ethical codes.
Yeah, and I guess we've had sneak peeks into what that potential future might look like in terms of those wheels turning, and they are turning, and there is going to be change ahead. And there's a blessing that I remember. It says, "May you live in interesting times." And this is for sure a really interesting time. You know, we can look at this kind of stuff and go, "Oh, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so confused by this." Well, so is everybody. So am I. So's Rory. This is all brand new. You know, we're not here speaking as experts. We're just two colleagues going, this is interesting. This is a new thing coming into what we do. How can we be vigilant? And we're going to continue having these conversations, you know. And if we find something that is in service of clients, we're going to let you know. We're going to let you know. So keep on tuning in. Have that conversation with your colleagues and those around you. And if you found anything interesting, please tell us. Write to support@counsellingtutor.com and tell us, or get into our Facebook, which is go on Facebook and put in Counselling Tutor and join the group there. Come and join this discussion. It's going to be a long discussion. We're going to still be speaking about it in 10 years' time. I think that's a good place to leave it for today. We'll leave it there for today. And I'm going to share that when I did my research for this, I used AI to do the research and put it together, Rory. So it's a tool that I use pretty much on a daily basis. So that is our ethical, sustainable practice. We hope that was useful for you. And we now go into Practice Matters. This is where we bring the experts in their fields to kind of bring information to you. And we have today a regular guest on the Counselling Tutor Podcast. It's Amy Launder, and she is speaking about supporting children of narcissistic parents in divorce, Rory.
Yes, it's a very important subject, and one that is, I think, one that sometimes isn't really spoken about. I caught up with Amy, and this is what she had to say. In practice, we may have particular presentations, and it's not unusual to have clients whose parents may be going through a divorce, and that can be made even more complicated if one or both of the parents present with narcissistic behaviour. So I'm delighted to welcome a regular lecturer for Counselling Tutor, well-liked and incredibly well-loved by the feedback we get by our audience, Amy Launder, who's done a fantastic lecture called Supporting the Children of Narcissistic Parents in Divorce. Amy, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
It's a pleasure. So I think this is very, very interesting, isn't it? As a former school counsellor, I know just how tough it is for children, and I'm talking of school age, but I guess any age, when their parents decide to separate, and sometimes, you know, it's for the best. People sometimes just fall out of love or just move on. But it can be particularly difficult for children whose one or both parents, present very narcissistic traits. What would you say is the main difference?
Yeah, I mean, it impacts differently at different ages as well, like even with adult children when their parents are divorcing. But I would say the main difference when the parents, one or both, have narcissistic traits is the way that they act during the divorce. Like a narcissistic parent will use the children as weapons against the other parent. So, they might have, when the parents were together, the narcissistic parent might have been really absent, really neglectful. And suddenly they are, all over the children because they want to win the children's love and thereby kind of take the love away from the other parent. So they're using the children as a weapon, not really thinking at all about the impact it's having on the children. Yes.
I mean, I think that's a very, very common thing. Certainly I've seen that a lot in my practice, where you have an absent parent and then all of a sudden they become the most loving parent in the world, and sometimes with an open checkbook. And I guess, I spoke about school children, but I mean, this could be any age. It's a dual burden, really, isn't it? Is it a dual burden on the children, because they're having to deal with the divorce, but also they're having to deal with this kind of renegotiation of the relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think divorce, even without the whole narcissistic element, it makes the children grow up a lot faster than they maybe would have otherwise, because they're suddenly seeing their parent is not just mum or dad. Their parent has their own things going on and is not maybe totally there for the child, even without the narcissistic traits. But with, one parent who has narcissistic traits, even the one who doesn't have these traits is very, distracted, become quite absent during the divorce process because they're having to deal with all the narcissistic stuff from the other parent. So it might be custody battles and things like that, or it might just simply be, trying to keep themselves safe, trying to keep the children safe, and they're focused on that and not actually what's going on for the children. Yes,
and what do you think the impact could be on the children? What is the usual presenting issue you would see in your practice?
Yeah, I think a lot of it will be parentified children. So, like I said, children who end up growing up a lot faster than maybe they should have. This is when the divorce happens when they are children, not as adult children. Especially for the oldest child, or the most responsible child, who might not necessarily be the oldest, who then takes on quite a parenting role for the other children. But then it can kind of go anyway, to be honest. So it can be, wanting to be the best child, wanting to be the most helpful. But there could also be a lot of rebellion as well. It really depends on the child as an individual. Yeah.
I mean, there's a fair amount there, isn't there? And just to focus on that, having to grow up very quickly, and having to, maybe in some cases, I don't know if you've experienced this, they actually take the role of the parents on. The child actually has to become the parent.
Yeah, and parenting not only the other children, but the parents themselves. So, becoming the emotional support for their mum or their dad, or and a lot of the time, especially when you get into kind of late childhood, early, teenage years or any teenage years, becoming the emotional support and becoming the confidant for the one or both parents. And this can also really be manipulated by the narcissistic parent, who can often put themselves in the position of the victim. This is happening to me, or your other parent is really horrible, they've done this to me. And the children, of maybe not knowing the whole dynamics and the extent of the narcissism maybe in the one parent, can be sucked in by this and really turned against the non-narcissistic parent by the narcissistic parent as well. So there's a lot of manipulation going on, and the children just want to help. And they're being kind of used as pawns a lot of the time.
Yes, and I've known a lot of cases, both in my practice, but also people I've met through my life, who have been forced to take sides with their parents, and sometimes they've taken sides with the narcissistic parent because it seemed the most appealing thing to do, but have found themselves back in a narcissistic relationship.
Do you mean themselves as a romantic relationship later in life?
Well, no, I was thinking more the parent was manipulating them and manipulating and guiding their life. I don't think that's very unusual, is it, with a narcissistic presentation?
No, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the time, narcissistic parents will see their children as extensions of themselves. So, the child is not their own being. They are there for the parent to do with what they want, to dress them how they want and for them to do the sport that they want to do and things like that. So there's a lot of control elements going on with the narcissistic parent, but it's not always the kind of what we see on TV with the dad who wants their child to be the best at basketball or whatever it is in these American shows. It can very often be a parent that presents really emotionally distressed and really upset by what the other parent is doing, and so the child can get sucked in that way, thinking, "Oh, poor parent, I need to be there for them."
Yeah, absolutely, and as I say, this kind of, I guess it's kind of stops development, doesn't it? Because children develop into adults, but I think there can be a tendency for the children to be infantilized. Is that even a word? Have I made that word up? Kept in an infant state. I think that's what I was trying to get at. Even as they get older, they I met a few people who were clearly, children, although they were chronologically adults and quite older adults in the 40s and 50s. They were clearly children because one of the parents hadn't let them grow up.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually, because there's, a narcissist needs supply. It's called narcissistic supply, where, they've got people who worship them. And as children turn into teenagers, they naturally rebel, and it's part of the process of separating from the parent. And that's a really difficult stage for a narcissistic parent, because suddenly their biggest source of supply, which is their child or children who really look up to them, is now rebelling and forming their own ideas. And so that either the child can go really rebellious, or they can become, remain children, like you say. And what I've seen very often in families where there's more than one child is one goes one way and one goes the other.
Yes.
So one becomes, part of the narcissist's world and stays that way. And I've seen it where the 30-year-old children still living at home with that parent, and then the other has moved across the country or moved across the world and really sees what has been happening at home, and whereas the other one can't quite see it. And also what happens in those situations is that the one who's tended to stay at home with them or stay very close to the narcissistic parent becomes very narcissistic themselves, or becomes like a flying monkey, it's called, of the narcissist. So they do the narcissist's bidding.
Oh yes, I think you've hit an interesting term there. Flying monkeys. We don't literally mean monkeys that are flying through the air. So when we talk about flying monkeys, what actually does that term reference?
So it actually comes from The Wizard of Oz, where the Wicked Witch doesn't actually go out and do her own bidding. She sends out all those flying monkeys, or what they were supposed to look like flying monkeys, but there was no CGI back then. So she sent them out to do her bidding. And so that's what we mean by flying monkeys with narcissists. It might be their child, it might be their friend, it might be their sister, and it's someone. Very often, if you try to kind of cut contact or put in boundaries with a narcissist, this flying monkey, whoever it might be, will maybe come around and say, "Oh, but they're your dad, you can't cut them off," and it's so mean. They need you. He really needs you, and so they're doing the narcissist's bidding, maybe without really knowing how bad the narcissist is, because they've not seen the light either. So it's not necessarily that this flying monkey is narcissistic themselves as well. They're just under the spell of the narcissist. I like
that term, under the spell, because because having seen this behaviour played out, certainly in practice with clients, and also in my wider network, it's a very nefarious way of doing things, isn't it? Where you get someone to say, "Oh, he or she's not really like that, and they really love you," and it's almost like ganging up on somebody until they just bend to the person's will. And I guess that brings me to, one of the final point is, as therapists, how do we engage with that when we hear this going on? What is our best intervention here?
Yeah, I mean, I would always say a lot of patience, because someone who's been dealing with a narcissist, whether it is a parent and family member or a partner or ex-partner, they tend to go back to the person a lot. So they might, with your support, have put boundaries in or even got no contact, but it's very difficult not to get sucked back in by the narcissist. And the term actually is hoovering. So the narcissist will hoover them back in, whether it's by like their own deeds or flying monkeys. So a lot of patience as the client goes through that cycle of being pulled back in and then cutting them off, and then going through that a few times maybe before the boundaries kind of stick. So a lot of patience is definitely needed there. I think that would be my main thing. A lot of psychoeducation as well, actually, and explaining these terms and what they mean, and encouragement and acknowledgement of how difficult it is, what they're trying to do, that, trying to put in boundaries or go no contact with a parent is very, very difficult.
Yeah, so you would definitely say in cases like this, the old therapist adage is, I can tell you what I know, and you say this could be hoovering, or there's a term called flying monkeys. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Sometimes I think for colleagues in the person-centered realm, that can be quite difficult. But as I say, my practice was primarily person-centered, but sometimes that psychoeducation element can be so helpful. And I also think, I don't know if you agree with me, that when you're working with someone who is starting to build their own autonomy, starting to put their boundaries in, and then they fall back, to be supportive, to not be judgmental on that, because they may then withhold any information. They may not tell you what's going on.
Yes, exactly. And very often, with their other friends and family who have maybe been very supportive of the fact that they put in boundaries, and then the person has slipped back and been hoovered in, the other friends and family might be quite judgmental, and then they withhold. So that you as the therapist needing to be different and needing to be that non-judgmental space where they can come in and say, I spoke to them, or I've answered a phone call, or whatever it was. So like you say, that they're not holding back information from you, and you can really work with what they're actually bringing, rather than them feeling bad or feeling guilty that they've been hoovered back in.
I think that's a really, really good point. People who view the lecture, and the lecture is called Supporting the Children of Narcissistic Parents in Divorce. It's in the CPD library for our CPD members. What would you hope they took away from this lecture?
I think just the different level. So it's not just parents getting divorced. There's a whole other level, and very often hidden, of the manipulation and the insidious nature, and also the almost kind of double hit of, parents are getting divorced and oops, I've accidentally sided with the narcissistic one, or I've been manipulated by the narcissistic one. And very often when that happens, they think, and therefore you think, because you're only going on what they're telling you, that the other parent is the narcissistic one, because they're being fed lies by the actual narcissistic parent. So there's a lot to unpick in these cases with these clients. Yes,
and I guess as always, it's meeting the client where they're at, and seeing the client first and foremost, and the jumble that can sometimes be the relationships, maybe into the back one. It's always a joy interviewing you. I've certainly come away with a couple of new words for my vocabulary, flying monkeys, and which I did actually know, but I didn't know the term hoovering. So I'm definitely going to put that in my big book of terms. That's so useful. And all it remains for me to say is, Amy Launder, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rory, and thank you, Amy. What an interesting discussion. And if you enjoyed that and you'd like to see more of Amy speaking about this topic, then you can access that in the Counselling Tutor CPD library. It's our continuing professional development library, only for qualified practitioners. This is an advanced topic. And Amy has a few lectures in our library. So if you remember, just log in and you will see the lectures there. If you're not a member, just go to counsellingtutor.com, because all the information is there for you. So that brings us now on to Student Services. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit counsellingskillsacademy.com to learn more and to claim your Counselling Tutor discount. That's counselingskillsacademy.com. You know, it's nobody becomes a counsellor without having gone through this student journey. It's an important journey. It can be a challenging journey. It can be a journey of growth and development. It's a very special time. It really is. And we recognize it. I think our roots are in the student journey. Both Rory and myself, we taught together for some years, and we recognize some of the challenges maybe that students face. And one challenge that comes up again and again around this time of year, keeping in mind if you're listening in real time, this is January 24, is placements. I've got to go into placement. I'm maybe in level 4, or I'm doing my degree, and it's now the time that I need to step out and go into placement where my practice is overseen by my learning provider, my supervisor, and of course the placement I'll be working in. It's kind of where we get that live experience working with clients, but in a supported situation. But it can be challenging navigating and finding a placement, Rory.
It can be, and just for our good friends in Scotland who listen in Scotland, their levels are slightly different. So we'll say certificates and diploma or degree. They're all the same journey. The levelness is just slightly different in Scotland. So yeah, you're doing a certificate, and you've done your certificate, then you go on to do your diploma in counselling, and at some point you're going to have to get yourself a placement. It's usually 100 hours of face-to-face client work to pass that part of the course. And the challenge is to find a placement. And I think the first thing to do when you're looking at placements is start to ask around your peer group. There's strength in a bit of a mastermind, I think. And all your peer groups are in the same position. Some may have placements already. Some may still be looking, but start to ask around your peer group. They're a very good source because they'll probably, they've done that. They've done a lot of looking around. They may be able to give you information. Certainly ask your tutors, because your tutors should have a good working knowledge of where their students are being placed. And also, use social media. I mean, Ken's mentioned our Facebook page. Go on to Counselling Tutor and just ask the question, placements in such and such an area. And, you may be surprised at the results. I think the one thing that is becoming a bit of a trend now is that people are going to have to travel a bit farther for placements. When I started, my placement was just down the road. I mean, it was about 10-minute drive. Nowadays, people are getting placements in different towns. And I think the reason for that is that placements are usually run by charities. And, charities are feeling feeling the pinch, a bit under pressure with the way the economy is. So it may be that some open, some close. So you may have, I think that's the first thing. Try to widen your search, because the more wider your net is, the more placements you're possibly going to have. And also, I think preparing yourself, Ken, we've talked about this many times, think about how you present yourself, how you contact a placement. Usually, one of the tips that I usually say is write a letter to the practice manager, not email, write a letter, because letters tend to be opened. Emails, they drop into the email box and sometimes you just slide by. If you write someone a letter, you'd be surprised at the response you can get. So you sometimes need some creative ways of getting in front of the people who select you for your placement, or can signpost you on to the method that you need to go onto the list to be a placement therapist.
Definitely. And undoubtedly, if you are going into placement now, it's a very different world to when Rory and I did our placements. Now there is an allowance, let's say, for a blended placement. So maybe some of your hours might be held online. And certainly when we look to what the government here in the UK specifically, where they're kind of pointing, their direction is very much online. They're looking at online tools. They're investing heavily in online tools for health and for social care and for mental health provision. So it is not unusual that you may find yourself doing a little bit of your placement, a number of your hours using an online platform, which of course frees up that geographical anchor of, you were saying, Rory, you might need to travel a little bit further now. And of course, if you're working online, of course, you need to stay within the borders of the United Kingdom. I'm speaking if you are in the United Kingdom, you need to look at the laws and that govern kind of where you might be in the world if you're outside of the United Kingdom. But it kind of allows somebody in Manchester to quite happily meet with somebody that is in North Wales without getting into without any kind of travel at all. So that you can look a little further afield. Rory's already said, go on Google. If you go on Google and you search that you're looking for placements, you may find placements coming up. Another great place to look for placements is with your ethical body, with your professional body. If you're a student, you're going into placement, then there is a requirement. You're registered with one of the ethical bodies. Well, they will have a student services department, and generally they may have a list of placement opportunities that are available at the moment. You can speak to them. And I think also have a think about your direction. Where do you want to go within your practice? What is the group that attracts you in terms of working with a specific group? Are there any specialist agencies that resonate with you? So if I'm just going to use an example. When I was looking at going into my placement, I wanted to work with those that struggled with addictions. So it kind of gave me an area to focus on. So I was able to go, I know, I will contact these specific agencies because they deal with this. And there was maybe a benefit to myself in that, because I knew what I was looking at was kind of a niche down. And when I was speaking to those agencies, I was saying, I have a special interest in working with this client group. And that goes a long way. If you really do, if you've got any experience or reason that draws you to a specific client group, when you are kind of reaching out and making that contact, let them know why and how much you want to do a placement with them and why. And I think when looking at placements, we often think that the placement holds all the cards. They hold all of the power, but they don't. You do. It is your practice. From the very second you are in placement, it is your practice. It really is. And it is worth not just finding a placement, but finding the right placement, a placement that will value you, that will help you with training and onboarding, that will support you through your learning journey, that will do adequate assessments of your clients to make sure you're getting the right client groups and you're not getting client groups that are too advanced and outside of your competence range for a placement counselor. All of this is so important because it's such a developmental part of becoming a qualified therapist is this placement time. It's where we take all of the theory, all of the skills that we've learned, and it hits the road. The rubber hits the road, as they say. It becomes real. And we might think, well, I'm a placement counselor. But to that client that is in front of you, you're not their placement counselor. You're not their trainee doing your final year. You are their counselor. So really important time. Surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with a good placement that inspires you. The kind of placement where you think, yes, this is where I would like to work one day. These are the right kind of feelings. And when you're going out and maybe there's an opportunity to be interviewed by a placement, maybe you've been shortlisted, you've reached out, you've sent a letter, you've made contact, and you get to go and be interviewed. Make sure you're asking them the questions to make sure that this is the right fit for you for the many, many hours of your time that you are going to pour into that organization. They need to fit you and support you and nurture you in your development to becoming that fully qualified practitioner.
I was going to shout hallelujah there, Ken. I was so inspired by that. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! Yeah, hallelujah, brother. It's true. And I think there's also another little ingredient. And the other little ingredient is get yourself a decent supervisor.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you look around and find yourself, if you've got a real passion, and one of the things that, I'm sure this is your observation, Ken. We have people who are really, really passionate about being therapists and really passionate about helping certain client groups, which is fine. Find yourself a supervisor that has experience of that client group. So when you go to that interview and you're talking about, well, I'm interested in this, and these are the reasons why. And not only that, I have a supervisor who's got expertise in the client groups that you host, that you see, that you reach out to. That is going to be mightily impressive, I think, to someone who's interviewing you. And also, it's right that this is where you're putting your foundations down to your practice. This is where you take the theory, the practice you've done in your counselling skills at college or university, and you take the personal development you're doing, and then you integrate that into real life work with the support of a supervisor. And what it should be is a nurturing, growing, exciting time in your practice. You should be literally bouncing into college. You go, oh, I never guess what's happened here. This is so great. Or bouncing into your supervisor. What you shouldn't be, if you're sitting there and you feel like you're a cog being ground down, you're not going to be in a position to be able to be everything for your clients. And I think there's some really good examples of someone contacted me this week who are talking about who just, as it happens, speaking about placements, all the things that they did. They paid for supervision, they gave CPD, they had their own supervision groups that you could go to. Fantastic. There are some really, really good ones. And sadly, there are some who are not so good. You will hear on the grapevine, once you tune into the grapevine or your local area, you will soon find out which are the ones that people really want to be a part of, and the ones that, sometimes I heard students say, well, it's a placement. And my heart sunk when people said that, Ken. Yeah. Well, I've got a placement. I can do my 100 hours. And my heart used to go, oh, no. Yeah. No, it shouldn't be just I managed to get something. It's like saying, well, I managed to find a girlfriend that she's all right, but she's not, And you want it to be, a kind of exciting time, a time of immense growth, because let me tell you that the biggest spurt of growth in any counselling career is in those first 100 hours.
Oh, yeah.
It's like growing a little plant. You spurt up, and if it's not sustainable and if it's not nourishing, your growth is going to be, I'm not going to say stunted, but it's not going to be the same experience. And that will probably impact through your career. This is the foundation. Strong foundations, make good buildings, and they make strong practitioners. So, I hear it's a struggle out there, but keep at it. You'll get a placement, and I really do hope that it's the nourishing, exciting, and just plain old fantastic time that you should be having as a trainee.
Yeah, and that is a lovely intention you've put out there, Rory, and I agree with you. And if you maybe do find yourself, maybe you're in a placement and maybe you're going, oh, my placement is not the ideal fit for me. Well, the good news is you can have more than one placement. You don't have to put all of your eggs in one basket. You might get that placement and go, this is not ideal. This is not how I'd like to run my practice. It's not how I would run it if I had this agency. It's not an exact fit for me. You can look around while in placement there for a more ideal placement for yourself. And there's also, I just want to put this in, there is also great learning if you find yourself in a place that's not 100% the right fit for you. there's really good learning there, because you can ask yourself questions like, what is it that's not a right fit for me? What would I do differently? How would I do it? And it kind of informs maybe the kind of organizations you might choose to work with when you do graduate, or how you might set up and run your own private practice. You might go, oh, well, I'll never do that. Well, that's brilliant. You're learning something from it. So even if it's not the most ideal. Yes, Rory.
Or I think what we forget is that students are on the arc of their practice. They are in the classroom learning the latest things. So, what's happened from time to time is students have come to me and they've said, I'm not really happy about the contracts my agency has. I've learned that contracting is completely different and it needs this and that. And my response was, in a kind of northern way, well, what are you going to do about it? And they go, well, can I tell them? I said, of course you can. And they'd go and they'd say, we don't think this contracting is robust enough. And it was amazing just how many placements said, thank you very much, because they'd done their work years ago. The people in practice had done their work years ago. Maybe they'd missed something. And the student had come along and said, look, this is better. This is more supportive to the client. And as a consequence, hey ho, they took the student's view, your view, student's view. It's very important. And there you go. They altered their policies and they altered their contract. And we had two students who were very, very smug for a few weeks because they kind of altered the organisation.
Quite rightly so. And that's it. As soon as you're in placement, you have a voice. You really do have a voice. And I know that there has been, specifically with the rise of online and telephone counselling due to COVID, there were agencies where maybe the staff in those agencies hadn't been trained on the latest technology, how to use it, how to work using that technology. And placement counsellors were encouraged to use their own phones for speaking to clients. And of course, that is not ethical, but the students were able to pick that up, know that, because they were training and they were learning within the class that this is not right, and they were able to inform the practice. So it works both ways. It's not just if it's not going 100% how you want it to, that the only thing you can do is leave. You can affect change. We're called on in our ethical frameworks to exercise candor, and candor is telling it as it is, I think, is the best way of putting it. Saying, no, that's not right. You can't expect me to use my own phone. That's my private details that somebody can phone me at 3:00 in the morning. No. So there's all these considerations. Enjoy it. Be excited about your placement. Put positive intentions in your placement. I too stand with Rory and positively intend for you that you find the right placement for you, that you are nurtured and that you grow within your practice in service of those clients. And here's the thing, some resources for you. First of all, a free resource. We've made a handout for you that you can get by going to counsellingtutor.com podcast tab. Go to today's episode, which is 286, and there's like a download. It's just some points that we've kind of covered today. Very, very short, concise on what we've discussed today. Just ideas and thoughts on getting a placement. However, we have a much, much richer and more in-depth resource. If you are a member of our student library, it's called Counselling Study Resource. It's a library that Rory and I built together, not just with our knowledge, but by inviting in top professionals and tutors from all around the country. And within there are lectures and resources on the very topics that you study within your counselling arc. And one of the very valuable resources in the Counselling Study Resources is a workshop. It's an entire workshop on finding your placement. It's over an hour. It comes with accompanying documentation, and it takes you through the whole of the consideration, how to reach out. And Rory's even been kind enough to add a letter in there, a structure of a letter that you can download and kind of tweak and personalised to your own way for sending into placements. So if you are a member of the Counselling Study Resource, log in, just search the word placement and you'll find it straight away. If you're not a member of the Counselling Study Resource, the free resource handout you can have. And if you're interested in joining the Counselling Study Resource, our library for students, go to counsellingtutor.com and all the information is there. And that kind of brings us to the end of this episode. This has been podcast episode 286 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, what a great podcast it was. We started off with ethical, sustainable practice, and we talked about the world of artificial intelligence and data protection. This brave new world that's going to be so helpful in so many ways, but one of which we have to maintain vigilance in the service of protecting our clients' data and confidentiality. We then moved on to Practice Matters, an interview with Amy Launder, one of our favorite, if you like, they're all our favorite lectures, but she's done so many lectures for us, and on the Children of Narcissistic Parents in Divorce. So a very important and I think a very pertinent lecture given the world that we're now living in. And then finally in Student Services, Ken and myself shot the breeze on planning your placement journey, finding and navigating a placement maze. And finally, if you've enjoyed this podcast, why not give us a like or a review on your podcast app, the platform that you're listening to on this. It makes so much difference, and it means that we can get into the ears of more and more therapists and hopefully entertain and inform them. And also, don't forget to show and share the podcast on your social media. If you think there's someone who could be helped by the podcast, or it's something that's interesting that may help a peer or a colleague, then please share it. And we're always here to serve you and to be helpful. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.